how the process of becoming a surrogate works. Now, after watching all of our videos, I'm sure you're probably curious as to what all we have to go through and everything we have to endure to be considered for a surrogacy program. So with both of my agencies, I remember that I needed to go through a interview process. So first started the interview process with Trish for choice. So we just had a quick on the phone conversation. You know, we talked about all of the things that I was looking for and all of the things that they were looking for, as far as, you know, did I meet the requirements and all of that kind of thing. And then also, did we vibe well? Because the way that Choice works, they're very familial oriented. They're very small in the aspect of like, it's a lot closer knit than if you were to go to a bigger agency that, you know, is matching hundreds of parents with surrogates. So they just wanted to make sure that I matched the vibe that they were hoping, you know, to work with. And then after that, I started going through a bunch of other processes. So what that looks like is, I believe after I had my interview with Trish, I filled out the application to make sure that I would be approved for it. I know that there is background check that you have to do for criminal offenses. You also have to have your medical records sent over to make sure that your body is capable of withstanding another pregnancy. You also have to go through lab testing. So you have to go and have your blood drawn, make sure that everything is tip-top with all that stuff. Then you also have to go to your OB. You have to have a PAP. You have to have all the things up to date so that they know when your last exam was and that everything was good. And then you also have to go through several evaluations. And what I mean by that is, depending on your agency and the clinic that you're working with, you might have to do a mental health evaluation 3 times. That's possible. Actually, I had to do one 3 times. So you have to do one with the agency, and then you have to do one with the clinic that you end up working with. I remember with my first journey, I also had to have a social worker Zoom with us, and then we had to show her our house to make sure that everything was safe, that I wasn't living, you know, in a bad environment. So then you also have to talk to a caseworker some of the time too. So it's a lot to become a surrogate. You know, it's just to ensure that you're in it for the right reasons, to ensure that you have the mental health support that you need, to make sure that you're not going to have any medical complications, physical complications. So I had to have my blood drawn, and I had to go to the clinic for my medical clearance. They did a mock embryo transfer, which basically they're just looking at my uterine cavity to make sure that there are no tears, no fibroids, or, you know, any kind of fluid, anything like that. They just want to make sure that they have a nice clean canvas to work with when it comes to implanting the embryo. So I also had to go through an assessment. I had to do it was a psychiatric assessment essentially. So it was like a 300 question multiple choice answer personality test, basically, to make sure that I wasn't a psychopath. So you also have to do those, and that is what I had to end up doing twice. So I did it before I had my medical clearance, and then I did it after my medical clearance. Anybody who thinks that they're just going to jump on the internet and find an agency that's going to take them without doing extensive research on their person and their medical history is sorely mistaken, because there is a lot of background that takes place when you choose to be a surrogate. So, you know, just make sure that you're prepared for that, because it's a hurry and a wait process. Everybody thinks that you're just going to go in, you're going to get matched, you're going to get pregnant, you're going to start, you know, getting that payment. And that's not how it works. In fact, even though you make it to a match and you get through your med cycle and stuff, there's still a lot that can happen between doing your med cycle to when your embryo transfer is. It just kind of depends on how your body is reacting to all of the medications that you're taking. It depends on if everything with your lining checks are checking out, no pun intended, you know, to make sure that you're creating a suitable habitat for that embryo. So just because you have a transfer date doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen then. So you have to be really patient when you're going through this process, but it is very well worth it.